Hello, guys. This week we're discussing Christianity and the American Revolution. We were asked to read a chapter from a number of books, and I read uh, the first chapter of American Zion by Iran Shavlev. I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce any names or words in this. Uh, the chapter is entitled The Jewish Cincinnatus, and basically it starts out talking about Gideon from the Bible, who was chosen by God to lead a number of men to defeat an invading force. Uh, and basically, he had to whittle down the number of men that he had. At the beginning, I believe it was around 10,000 or so, and it was whittled down by a test at a watering hole. But at first, whoever didn't want to be there, who didn't want to fight, if they were afraid, they were allowed to leave. And so I think it came down to about 10,000 after that. And then there was this test at a watering hole, and basically those who uh, got on their hands and knees and basically stuck their face in the water and lapped it up that way, they weren't acceptable. It was only those who actually picked the water or pulled the water in their hands and drank like this, lapped it up like that, because basically they were still paying attention. They were still aware of what their surroundings were, and if anyone actually approached, they could see. Whereas if you had your face in the water, well, guess what? You're not really paying attention. Um, so that's how he got his 300 men, and he managed to defeat a host that invaded the country that was probably 10 times larger or more. Uh, and so Gideon was celebrated among the Hebrews or the Israelites, and he was asked to be their king, and that his son would be heir to the throne and rule them as well. And Gideon actually replied that no, I I'm not going to rule you, nor will my son. God is going to rule you. And I think that is the premise of what the rest of the chapter dealt with. Uh, Basically, the whole book is about the Old Testament being uh, basically a political influence on the revolution. The Bible as a political text, which, if you think about it, uh, yeah, I mean the Bible is probably a political text. It's also a history book. There's plenty of history in this, and I can see how this book actually influenced the revolutionaries. They He actually talks about George Washington, uh, and how he was basically similar to Gideon, where he really didn't want to be in power at all. And once his commission was over, or once the war was over, he resigned his commission and he retired. He did his duty and he wanted to be done. And basically, this our chapter actually does talk a little bit about how George Washington was like Gideon, where he reluctantly accepted the presidency. I mean, really, in truth, I don't think he really wanted it, but he realized that the people needed him to become the president, and so he reluctantly became president. And it does talk about classical humanism, uh, which in a way is an offshoot from the Enlightenment, uh, and it probably did do a little influencing of people such as John Locke and Thomas Paine, uh, and it does talk a little bit about the Great Awakening and how that also helped influence the revolution. Uh, it's an interesting chapter. Uh, I would probably have to reread it again. I think because I'm sure I probably missed some things in it. Um, so it's probably something I would have to reread again to maybe completely understand it. But it was an interesting chapter, and I find it fascinating that the Bible is considered a political text, especially for the Revolution. Um and I highly recommend possibly, buying the book. I might actually look into maybe buying the book myself. Uh, I also use some of the other materials that we were assigned to read, such as "Did America Have a Christian Founding?" which, uh, depending on who you're reading, they might say no, or some people might say, well, not real. Yeah, maybe, or yes, definitely. But the problem is when was the founding of the country? Was it when people set foot, on Plymouth Rock or Jamestown? Because basically a lot of those settlements were actually Christian communities. In fact, if you read the Mayflower Compact, uh, that does discuss, we're here and we're going to follow the laws of God and Christ, and also the Connecticut con- uh, kind of the Connecticut Constitution, or rules or regulations that were founded as well when the colony was actually founded. Also, again, it discussed the laws that we're going to pass are going to be based on the Ten Commandments or God. So Christianity was a very important element in the founding of our nation, at least at that particular time. uh, Maybe what we would consider the founding of our country is either 1776 or when the Constitution was written, around 1783, 1789, somewhere around there. 1791 for sure, when uh, uh, the Constitution was ratified and we became the United States. Again, yes, the U.S. Constitution says very little about God, but it does have in the First Amendment, the uh, Congress cannot pass any laws regarding religion. So basically, freedom of religion. Uh, it was acceptable at that time that the the states or the local communities would be the ones that would actually determine which religion that the states would have. Eventually, that became unnecessary because all the churches were established by 1832, and so all the states had freedom of religion of a certain type. Uh, so it is an interesting subject to look into and to do research in. Uh, but well, anyways, thank you for listening.